The military courtroom at Fort Bragg was packed the day they read the charges against Major Rachel Chen. I sat in the back row in my dress uniform, medals on my chest, hands clenched so tight my knuckles had gone white. Around me sat other members of our unit, soldiers who'd served with Rachel in Iraq, who'd trusted her, who'd followed her orders without question. Now we were watching her stand at attention while a JAG officer read the charges that could end her life as she knew it. Major Rachel Chen, you are hereby charged with unauthorized disclosure of classified information, conspiracy to commit espionage, and conduct unbecoming an officer. These charges carry a maximum sentence of 25 years in military prison and dishonorable discharge. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, and Major Rachel Chen had been my executive officer for 3 years. She was brilliant. West Point graduate, fluent in Arabic and Farsi, one of the sharpest tactical minds I'd ever worked with. She'd saved my life twice in Fallujah and had been recommended for a Bronze Star. And now they were calling her a traitor. It had started 6 weeks earlier, in the middle of our deployment to northern Iraq. Rachel had been running intelligence operations, coordinating with local tribal leaders, building the kind of relationships that kept our soldiers alive. She'd been good at it, maybe too good. Then one morning military police had stormed into our compound and arrested her. The allegations were devastating. She'd been passing classified intelligence to unauthorized foreign nationals. She'd been meeting secretly with individuals suspected of having ties to Iranian intelligence services. She'd been photographed exchanging documents with a man identified as a known enemy operative. The evidence looked damning. Surveillance photos showed her in a cafe in Erbil, sitting across from a man in civilian clothes, sliding an envelope across the table. Cell phone records showed dozens of calls to numbers that traced back to Tehran. Financial records showed deposits into her account from shell companies linked to Iranian intelligence. I didn't believe it. Couldn't believe it. But the evidence was there, cold and undeniable, laid out in classified briefings that made even her strongest defenders pause. Now, as I watched her stand ramrod straight in that courtroom, her face a mask of controlled emotion, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew. Had I been blind? Had I trusted someone who'd been betraying us all along? The prosecution's opening statement was brutal. Major Chen had access to some of our most sensitive intelligence operations, the prosecutor said, pacing in front of the panel of officers who would decide her fate. She knew our sources. She knew our methods. She knew the identities of Iraqi nationals who were risking their lives to help American forces. And she sold that information to our enemies. He pulled up one of the surveillance photos on a screen. Rachel in the cafe, the envelope clearly visible. This photograph was taken by CIA surveillance on March 15th. The man she's meeting with is Reza Ahmadi, a known Iranian intelligence officer operating under diplomatic cover. 3 days after this meeting, 2 of our Iraqi informants were found executed. 1 week later, an operation we'd been planning for months was ambushed. 4 American soldiers died. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Felt sick. The defense will tell you there's more to this story, the prosecutor continued. They'll tell you about classified operations and need-to-know compartmentalization. But the evidence is clear. Major Chen betrayed her oath, betrayed her country, and betrayed the soldiers who trusted her. When he sat down, Rachel's defense attorney, a Navy JAG captain named Sarah Mitchell, stood up. She looked nervous, which made me even more worried. Members of the panel, she began. You've heard serious allegations. You've seen what appears to be damning evidence. But I'm asking you to wait before reaching any conclusions. Because what Major Chen was really doing, what she was ordered to do, is still classified at a level higher than anyone in this room is cleared to know. The lead panel member, a colonel with 30 years of service, frowned. Counselor, if there's exculpatory classified evidence, it needs to be presented to this court. Sir, I've filed multiple motions requesting declassification of the relevant files. Those motions have been denied by the Department of Defense. I've requested that witnesses with knowledge of Major Chen's actual mission be allowed to testify. Those requests have also been denied. Then what defense can you possibly offer? Captain Mitchell's jaw tightened. The only defense I can, sir. That Major Chen is innocent, that she was following orders, and that the truth is being suppressed for reasons of national security that have nothing to do with justice. It wasn't enough. I could see it in the panel members' faces. Without proof, without evidence, without anything to counter the prosecution's case, Rachel was going to be convicted. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Rachel. About the time she'd had my back in combat. About the intelligence reports she'd written that had saved countless lives. About the way she'd always put her soldiers first, even when it cost her personally. She wasn't a traitor. I knew it in my bones. But knowing wasn't enough. I needed proof. At 0200 hours I got up and went to my office. I had limited access to classified systems, but I'd been Rachel's commanding officer. Maybe there was something in her service records, something in the mission logs, something that would make sense of what was happening. I started digging. Rachel's deployment orders were standard. Intelligence officer attached to Special Operations Task Force, authorized to conduct liaison operations with local nationals. Nothing unusual. But then I found something strange. In her orders, there was a reference to Operation Nightingale, a designation I'd never heard before. It wasn't in any of the mission briefs I'd been given. Wasn't in any of the intelligence summaries I'd read. It was like it didn't officially exist. I ran the operation name through every database I had access to. Nothing. It had been scrubbed from all the standard systems. But I knew someone who might have access to deeper files. Chief Warrant Officer James Rodriguez had been with military intelligence for 20 years. He was the guy you went to when you needed information that didn't officially exist. I called him at 0300, woke him up, and asked him to meet me. We met at an all-night diner off base, sitting in a corner booth away from other customers. "You're asking about something that could get us both in serious trouble," Rodriguez said after I explained what I was looking for. "Rachel Chen is being court-martialed as a traitor," I replied. "If there's evidence that proves otherwise, don't we have an obligation to find it?" He studied me for a long moment. Then he sighed. Operation Nightingale was a joint CIA military intelligence operation. Deep cover. The kind of thing that officially doesn't exist. What was it? I can't give you details. But I can tell you this. Rachel Chen was running a double-agent operation. The Iranian officer she was photographed with. He wasn't her handler. He was her asset. She'd flipped him 2 years ago and had been running him as a source ever since. My mind raced. So she was supposed to be meeting with him. She was supposed to be passing him information. Controlled information, yes. Intelligence that had been carefully prepared to seem valuable while actually misleading Iranian intelligence about our operations and capabilities. It's called a dangle operation. The information you give up is designed to protect larger strategic interests. Then why is she being prosecuted? Rodriguez's expression darkened. Because the operation went sideways. The Iranian officer, Ahmadi, was discovered by his own intelligence service. They tortured him, and he gave up the fact that he'd been turned. When that happened, Iran realized all the intelligence they'd been receiving from him was compromised. They launched a counterintelligence sweep. Some of our actual sources got caught in it. People died. But that wasn't Rachel's fault. No. It was a risk inherent to the operation. But someone needs to take the fall, and Rachel's handlers at CIA decided it couldn't be them. So they're hanging her out to dry. They've classified all the files related to Operation Nightingale so highly that even the court-martial panel can't access them. Without that evidence, she looks like a traitor instead of what she really was. A hero running one of the most dangerous operations in the entire theater. I felt rage building in my chest. How do we prove it? We don't. The files are classified top secret/SCI with special compartmented access. Even I can't get to them without committing crimes that would land me in Leavenworth. Then she's going to be convicted. Rodriguez leaned forward. Unless someone with the authority to declassify those files decides to do it. Someone who outranks the people trying to protect their own asses. Who would have that authority? The Secretary of Defense. Maybe the Director of National Intelligence. But you'd need to convince them that justice matters more than protecting a blown operation. I spent the next 2 weeks doing something I'd never done before. I became a pain in the ass. I wrote to my congressman. I wrote to the Senate Armed Services Committee. I wrote to the Inspector General's office. I wrote to every general officer I'd ever served under. I wrote to the Secretary of Defense's office. Most of my letters were ignored. A few got polite form responses thanking me for my service and assuring me that military justice was being properly administered. But one letter got a response that mattered. General Patricia Morrison had been my brigade commander in Afghanistan. She was now a 3-star general at the Pentagon. She called me personally. "Marcus, I got your letter about Major Chen," she said without preamble. "Tell me why you're so sure she's innocent." I told her everything. About Rachel's service record. About Operation Nightingale. About the CIA hanging her out to dry. About the classified files that would prove her innocence if anyone would just look at them. "You're asking me to stick my neck out," Morrison said when I finished. "To challenge people who have a lot more stars than I do. I'm asking you to do what's right, ma'am." There was a long silence. "The court-martial is scheduled to conclude in 3 days?" "Yes, ma'am. I'll see what I can do." I didn't hear anything for 48 hours. The prosecution rested its case. Rachel's defense put her on the stand, and she testified that she'd been following orders, that everything she'd done had been authorized, that she was innocent. But without evidence to support her claims, it sounded hollow. The closing arguments were scheduled for the next morning. That night, at 2100 hours, I got a call from Captain Mitchell. "Colonel Webb, you need to get to the courthouse now." When I arrived, the courtroom was in chaos. Military police were setting up additional security. JAG officers were rushing in and out carrying red folders marked with classification warnings. And at the front of the room, a man in a dark suit was setting up a secure display system. Captain Mitchell grabbed my arm. "I don't know what you did, but someone very high up just ordered the declassification of the Operation Nightingale files. They're being presented to the panel right now." We filed back into the courtroom. The panel members looked confused and overwhelmed. The prosecutor looked like he'd been hit by a truck. The man in the suit introduced himself as Deputy Director of the CIA's National Clandestine Service. "Members of the panel," he began, "what I'm about to tell you is still classified top secret. You will not discuss it with anyone outside this room. Is that understood?" The panel members nodded. For the next hour, the Deputy Director laid out the truth. Major Rachel Chen had been recruited by the CIA while still at West Point. She'd been trained in intelligence operations and had been running assets in the Middle East for 7 years. Operation Nightingale had been her most successful operation, a double-agent program that had provided critical intelligence on Iranian military capabilities, terrorist networks, and nuclear program activities. The surveillance photos that looked like espionage were actually controlled meetings with her asset. The money deposited into her account was operational funding from CIA. The classified information she'd passed was carefully prepared disinformation designed to mislead Iranian intelligence. "Major Chen didn't betray her country," the Deputy Director said. "She served it at great personal risk. When her asset was compromised, it wasn't due to any operational security failure on her part. It was bad luck and the inherent risks of intelligence work." He pulled up a document on the screen, a commendation signed by the director of the CIA. Major Chen was nominated for the Intelligence Star, one of our highest awards, for her work on Operation Nightingale. That nomination was classified. This court-martial was initiated by prosecutors who weren't read into the operation and who assumed the worst based on evidence they didn't understand. The panel members stared at Rachel, who sat perfectly still, tears streaming down her face. The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, in light of this new evidence, the United States withdraws all charges against Major Chen." 3 months later, Rachel stood in a small, windowless room at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. There were no cameras, no press, just a handful of senior officials and the soldiers who'd fought to prove her innocence. The director of the CIA pinned the intelligence star to her uniform. "You served with honor in the most difficult circumstances," he said. "And when your service was questioned, you maintained your integrity and trusted that the truth would prevail. Thank you, Major Chen." Afterwards, she found me in the hallway. "You didn't have to fight for me," she said. "Yes, I did. You're one of mine. That doesn't stop just because things get hard." She smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from her in months. "I'm putting in my retirement papers. 20 years is enough. Time to find out what normal life feels like." "You earned it." "So did you." She held out her hand. "Thank you, Marcus, for believing in me when everyone else saw a traitor." I shook her hand. I saw what I always saw. A damn good soldier who never stopped serving her country, even when her country didn't deserve her. Major Rachel Chen left the military 6 months later. As far as I know, she's working somewhere in the private sector, living a quiet life. Her greatest accomplishment still classified. The intelligence star she earned sits in a locked box, never to be displayed. Her name will never appear on any memorial. No one will write books about Operation Nightingale or the 7 years she spent running one of the most sensitive intelligence operations in modern American history. She's a hero no one will ever thank. But I know. Her soldiers know. And somewhere, in classified files that won't be declassified for 50 years, the truth is recorded. Major Rachel Chen served with honor. And that's all that matters.